Welcome everybody to our NC Festive Fireside Chats 2020 What the Flip. It's been a bit of a weird year for everyone, so we just thought we'd get together, a few of our friends, just to go through everyone's trials and tribulations and have a bit of a look at the year that was and the year that's coming ahead. So we are recording tonight's session. We do want you to ask as many questions as you want, any comments, use the chat functionality of this Q&A. Without further ado, I will hand you over to Ian, who's hosting tonight's session.
How are you all doing? How's your year's been?
Strange, odd, busy, all of the above, I think.
Yeah, my
pants, I guess. So that's one thing that didn't happen.
Well, no, I bet none of us have been wearing pants for the last 8 months anyway. And everybody's been wearing, like, if somebody gets up and goes to the toilet or something, goes to get a drink, you see them just wearing like PJ bottoms all year, which is pretty cool. My kind of lockdown started about a month earlier than the actual lockdown because I was actually meant to be on holiday from the beginning of March, and I was getting some of my work done effectively because I was just so busy. And then it all kind of started to kick off, and then we went into lockdown quite early. So it felt like has been forever.
Has anyone actually got away with wearing just pants on a Zoom call? I've done it once and nobody knew, just because I got out of bed. No, don't
I haven't pantsed it, but I know people that have, which will remain nameless.
I know that Lauren has definitely done yoga on a Zoom call and things before, maybe without a camera on.
Yeah. So I've been doing yoga in the back there whilst on supplier calls and things like that, because it's the only way that I'm actually getting any exercise in, to be honest. So I've been trying to multitask, which I think has been the aim of this year, is to try and work out how much I can fit into this rather small space and compress time, to be honest.
You're doing a good job. That room's got hella vibes, Lauren. I like it.
It is actually a lot smaller than it looks. So when I stand up, my head hits the ceiling. This is the basement. So it's got like a weird kind of trick of perspective that it's actually a lot smaller, but I'm packing a lot in. I've spent a lot of time down here.
How long was it before everybody kind of got themselves up and running with a proper home setup? I kind of put it off for a few months thinking, we'll go back to normal. And I spent the first 4 months kind of just perched with my laptop on top of a coffee table. And it took me, and eventually I had to give up and say, right, I'm going to have to buy a proper desk and a proper chair and a proper monitor and a proper keyboard because this just isn't working. I can't do this forever.
I guess it depends what you mean by proper home setup. I mean, can you see what's going on here? Does this count as a proper home setup?
I mean something that's sustainable, like having desks and monitors and things.
Lee, I imagine every day of the week looks like this, exactly like this for you. Party lights going on, guitars in the background, and red wine, is that?
It's mulled wine, also known as port and brandy, because they didn't really have much wine. But it's got all of the right components to it. So, it's got oranges and all the cardamom and
How many?
Not just alcohol. I'm not some kind of monster.
Port and brandy. That is a lot of port and brandy, like. That's strong.
Let's see how the conversation goes as that goes down.
Yeah.
High quality chat.
My pants are ripping on the other side as well. So this is literally, that shows you how much weight I've put on over the course of the year, really. I think that's gotten worse. So what's everyone planned? How's this year affected all of your plans from the beginning to the end? Because I definitely was not I thought this year was going to be my year, and then it definitely wasn't really. So how about you all? Jeff, what were you planning at the start?
Well, I was planning to go away. I hadn't booked it, thankfully, because I think I'd have struggled to get my money back. But I thought, I'll go away somewhere this year. Nice, maybe somewhere to Southeast Asia and enjoy traveling. And that didn't happen, did it?
No.
I mean, all of our there's a bunch of workshops and quite a lot of stuff I was doing for our central office that basically had to all go virtual. And also we're doing Code First Girls as well, and that had to suddenly jump from being in person to virtual, and that was really unusual the first time we did it, but the second time we did it was a lot easier.
How about you, Lee?
Yeah, I think that sort of rush to remote was quite an interesting concept that some people weren't really set up for. I loved traveling around, so I was dashing around maybe 10 different offices on a regular basis. And suddenly all that stopped. I mean, it takes me like a few hours to get to London from here and back again. Suddenly that ceased to happen. I had all this time on my hands and I thought, right, I can zoom in everywhere. I can be hyper efficient. I can be literally everywhere. Then I realized, that my brain is not just being carried around by my body, and I do need to actually look after myself a little bit. And that hyper efficiency curve kind of tailed off slightly. But yeah, it's an interesting one. It's not what anyone predicted, like you say, but I don't think it's been all bad. We're saying WTF 2020. It's not been all bad.
Rose, what about you? Because this is big. I remember I saw you in real life at the beginning of this year, in real life.
I didn't have much planned for this year at all because I graduated North Coders in February, and then I was like, okay, that's nice. Things, just get yourself a nice job. Things will calm down. Be careful what you wish for because things calm down way too much. And I've got moved from these 4 walls in 8 months. But like Lee was saying, it's not been the best year, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse. So I think, and it's nearly over. So
you found a new job there, didn't you? You started a new job.
Yeah. So I got offered the job also in February, really soon after graduating. And then they were like, well, your start date's not for another month. And I was like, oh, that's great. Who knows when I'm going to have another month to spend at home. Christmas. But yeah, the job part of it's been fantastic. Obviously not quite as good as it could have been. Like you do miss out on things like the atmosphere and the one-to-one and shadowing people and stuff like that. It's just so much harder when you're not actually in the same room. Obviously it's a really good industry to do things remotely, but you can't quite replicate that one-to-one. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, people adjust. And like I say, there's so many industries where they wouldn't be able to do it half as easily as we can. So quite lucky, really.
I know. Lauren, how about you? What were your plans at the beginning of this year? And how were they destroyed?
Well, I was momentarily smug because I managed to get on holiday in February. So I didn't really have a holiday last year. So I took up my role at BJSS in sort of July last year and just spent the sort of first couple of months kind of getting to grips with it. It's not really the right time to sort of go away. So because I hadn't really had a holiday last year, we'd kind of booked to go away in February, but then we went away, had a really nice time, and I've sat in the basement for 9 months. So I'm really lucky to have been able to get that kind of break in before all the kind of mania hit. And because I work in health and social care, then it's just been absolutely manic. I mean, the first probably 4 to 6 weeks were really quiet whilst everyone was kind of working out what to do and actually what the response needed to be and how it needed to look. But since then, it's just been just really, really manic. And because everything is so direct and it needs to be done now, then there's no room for planning. Like I'm quite methodical. I quite like to plan things, and then everything has been urgent now. And people's lives are on the line. You can't really say, oh, I was just wondering if we could talk about maybe slipping that start date for sort of 3 to 6 weeks. Yeah. It's just not possible. You just have to find a way to make it work. So it's been a bit mind-bending to try and work out how to do all of those things at the same time. So yeah, feeling fried, but kind of happy that we've made a good impact doing the right thing. But very, very tired, hence the yoga in the background, because it's some way of actually sort of stretching out and not sort of sitting here and solidifying in my chair for 12 to 14 hours a day.
I think the yoga room is genius. I've definitely, my back has got so much worse and I keep being like, oh, it's because you've got chubby, but it's not. It's because I don't walk anymore and I'm always sat down, be it the sofa or the living room. How do you think you've all adapted? I remember when this first happened, before it actually really went down, our chief operating officer, Sam, he was so on top of coronavirus. He was like checking out the news in China, and he cottoned onto it before it happened, and he was so quick to react to it. How do you think you've all coped with responding to it? Lee, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think organisations in general, because I've had visibility across quite a number of different industries and things, so I can kind of talk more broadly. It was that thrust into transformation and that digital acceleration. So we had companies that weren't really set up to work remotely that suddenly were forced into it. And that created its own issues, shall we say. But it was something that was already kind of happening, and we saw those trends happening, and every organisation was on that path. They just weren't quite ready to rush into it and rush to remote and rush. Everything just feels like very rushed and not fully thought out in some places. And I think we need to we'll come on to probably next year and what we need to do. But I think that everybody just kind of didn't really know what to do. And now it's a bit of time to take stock. And that's, what we're doing now.
Did you start Sun Digital this year?
Yeah, what better time to start your own consultancy, because Brexit's sorted, the deal's all done, economy's great, coronavirus is over. I'm sure there's 2 or 3 other, real great plus points as well. So I thought great time to start a consultancy completely remotely. Why not?
How's that panning out for you at the moment?
Ask me this time next year.
Rose, how about you? How did you adjust from working? So firstly, you're thrown into the boot camp, really intense learning, but you get to hang on to the other people that you're pairing with. You get to take advantage of lecturers, and then you're all of a sudden having to work remotely. How did you cope with that as a dev?
Well, so I mentioned that I had that month off before I started the job where we weren't actually in lockdown yet. And I during that time, all routine went out of the window because it felt like it was going to be temporary. So it was like, treat yourself, get up whenever you want, don't do any exercise, whatever. And then as soon as I realized that this was going to be a bit more long term, I had a bit of a word with myself and I was like, you have to force yourself into some kind of routine. Like, we have flexible working hours, like our core hours are, I think, 10 till 3:30. But around that, as long as you do your hours, you can sort of start and finish whenever you want. But I've been forcing myself, get up at the same time, do the same, because otherwise the days just have no meaning. Just making myself achieve even the smallest little things I think are so important, because everything gets so magnified. But equally, having stuff to do and starting a new job where you're learning so much in this time, I think it's been probably the perfect time to do it, because it's sort of tunnel visioned onto that, and you pick up more than you would usually because you've got nothing else to focus on or be distracted by. So positively, I'd say.
The change in tone really sells that. Jeff, you're a mental health coach. I spoke to you earlier today. How have you found the mental health of the people that you work with?
I think kind of like the old adage when they say about when you're on a plane, reach for your own your own mask first when they come down from the ceiling. I had to sort out that first, really make sure I was in a good place, because there's a lot of fear. I mean, people worried, initially whether or not we'd have jobs. And obviously LinkedIn was on fire at this point, and people were just summarily kind of made redundant, which was really not helping. So one of the first things I need to do is make myself comfortable that I'd be okay through this. And I actually took a course on a Yale University course on the science of wellbeing, which was really helpful because I had a load of really, really useful techniques. And I also did my mental health first aid training during this time as well. And it really was. So then once I kind of got my own house in order, so to speak, it was trying to keep people as calm as possible. Now we made sure our company comms were really clear that nobody's going to be made redundant. We were going to use the furlough scheme as required. We're going to take all the necessary measures, but keep everybody, not lose anybody. We didn't lose anybody. So it really, I think the main thing. We're very set up to be remote anyway. I mean, the offices are quite, because each club only grows to be 85 people or so. It was ideally set up. Everybody's remote. Everybody had a laptop anyway. So really, for us, it was helping our clients adapt. Some of which were really not ready for remote working or hadn't made themselves ready. I think it's interesting how many excuses they stripped away. You can't possibly work remotely, and then suddenly, maybe a week or so later, everything's sorted. It's interesting how those excuses melted away. But for me, it was the mental preparation, because some people were fine with it, or seemingly fine. And it really, it was fascinating to see some people, like I live on my own, and then there's the isolation aspect, and then there's people with families, and then they've got the exact opposite. They simply have there's nothing taking, there's no pressure valve on that pressure cooker, and seeing everybody have their own struggles during this time. And it's trying to balance the mental health and well-being of all the people who I know inside and outside of And. That was the biggest part to adapt to.
But Lauren, you mentioned that for a short period of time it was quiet, and then it was manic because you worked in the industry. How did you cope with handling that demand? And I'm assuming the lack of freedom. Surely it must have been really like restricting because it's so important. How did you deal with that? Changing way of working?
I think to Lee's point, I was also someone that would be kind of bouncing around the country as well. So sort of roles national. So I would be kind of zipping around, but also because I've got a clinical background, there's the additional layer around kind of thinking, where can I be of best value? Like, where can I do the right thing, and where can I, make the greatest impact at the moment? So my background was in urgent and emergency care. So I had that whole thing of like, do I go back? Am I any use in A&E at the moment? And I had a conversation with a few of my mates who asked me some questions, and they were like, no, don't come back. We're fine. We're all right. So I think the issue is around, for me, it's around trying to protect the team to make sure that they don't get exposed with clients who are super stressed, because the impact around sort of late deliverables, if you slip a sprint or two in normal times, it's not great, but it's not going to have the same impact that if it's something to do with COVID. So trying to make sure that people work to time, but actually all those things are balanced and are doable and are feasible, and that people don't feel that they have to burn themselves out in order to deliver stuff that they know is important. Like, people understand that they're delivering super, things that were discussed on national briefings every day. And there was a time where I was having to watch those every day to say, timelines changed, we've got a different delivery date, and other things like that. And that's not the best time to find out that maybe something's been brought forward, and just trying to balance all of that. So I think, and similar to Jeff, we were just trying to do the corporate comms thing around making sure that people understood that, there were jobs there, and that people felt that actually we were in it for the long haul, and people needed to pace themselves and not kind of get caught up in it all. And because my master's is in data science for public health as well, so that is also another thing, that being able to track everything is useful and not useful at times, because you get into terror scrolling, and that is unhelpful when there's nothing you can do massively to impact it from the sort of realms of Twitter. So I think it's about understanding where you can influence and where you can't, and putting stuff down and making sure, to Jeff's point around kind of pressure valves, and making sure everybody's got a different thing that works for them. Yeah. I'd go running or sort of do yoga or something and just not feel guilty about it. I think that's the other thing. When you've got, critical national deliverables, it does feel a bit frivolous to be like, do you know what, I'm going to do an hour of yoga. But actually, you're much better coming back to a problem or something later on once you've had that time to sort of step away from it. So just making sure that those things are there, and you don't feel the associated guilt for not pulling a shift, because it doesn't work in the long run.
Did you have any wobbles this year, Lauren, with all that pressure on, and to the rest of you, where you're sort of like, oh, this is the end. I can't do it anymore,
I don't know if it's a wobble, because I go and sort of, I've got a dog, so I sort of take the dog for a walk quite a bit, and she's been helpful and unhelpful actually in lockdown, but I think that's probably helped in terms of sort of getting out and being able to sort of have an excuse to kind of go out and just be alone-ish somewhere in the outdoors, in the fresh air. But you do have that moment where you just think, there's a lot of stuff riding on this, and I really, you have that moment where you're like, I can't be off, I can't be ill, I can't, I need to be here, and I need to sort of carry this. So it's not necessarily a wobble, but there's definitely a weight of responsibility. And having worked in sort of critical medicine before, I know how my coping strategy is to sort of deal with it. I've done major accidents, all of those things. It's afterwards that you then deal with being stressed and being burnt out. So I know that there's something in the post for me, and I know that will come probably next year, and I just have to make sure that I'm going to be able to deal with that.
Yeah, quite cool how you're prepping yourself mentally for it. That was kind of pretty warrior style. Rose, you started a new job. Have you taken any time off? Because I know if I started a new job, I'd be so scared of being away from work, because it feels like I wouldn't be there in the first place, being at home.
Yeah, yes and no. It was my birthday last week, and thank you. Just had to drop my in. But so I felt sort of obliged to take some time off for that. But then it was nice because like I had nothing to do, but equally it was a bit like, it's only so much Netflix you can watch, really. I did get a little trip to Scotland in, when things looked like they were easing up and then they were down again. So that was well timed and that did the world a good. But yeah, otherwise they've had to make some allowances. I'm sure this is the same of pretty much every company. They've had to make some different allowances to annual leave because obviously no one's got anywhere to go. So like the amount that you can either take over or sell has gone up. But yeah, I do think it's like Lauren was saying, it feels like you're missing out if you're taking a bit of a break, but equally you'll do so much better if you do take a bit of a break. Like so often you'll feel like you're obliged to someone to like get this done, but you can do it fast and half-hearted, or you can do it properly and take a bit longer. That's probably one of the biggest lessons I learned from North Coders. Don't just sit there jabbing at your keyboard until it does what you want.
Yeah, me and Jeff were talking about this earlier today and going on about how taking time away would help you relax. But Lee, you started a new business. When you start a business, you're not allowed to relax, are you? So
I'll let you know when I relax. But yeah, so for me, I mentioned before about being hyper efficient and jumping between Zoom meetings and thinking, Zoom plus was better. Rose, I think you said something great before, which was about small goals and breaking things up. And then once you've achieved that little bit, then, almost celebrate it. The day doesn't roll into the next day and you've kind of done that. In startup lands, I guess I'm not really a startup in the sense of, creating a product. We're a team of sort of consultants that have understood how consultancy works previously. So we're not exactly new to it. However, having that quick collaboration and, startups, they change stuff all the time. They pivot quickly. They respond to adapting change. When you're not all in the same room, that is a really tricky thing to achieve. Yeah. And I know that Lauren, me and you bouncing ideas off each other. We've in the past jumped on lots of Zoom calls, and I think that what will happen is we'll find a better way of doing it that's not Zoom. And whatever that new kind of technology or collaboration will kind of help and facilitate that. So yeah, I'm hoping that there's going to be some new tools at my disposal to kind of help with that startup collaboration and mentality.
What about seeing clients? Jeff, have you been able to see any clients at all? I know that earlier this year we've been to see one client when everything was okay. We got to see Ouija and we all sat socially distanced. But how have you managed to see anyone in person to do with work? Has it all been from home?
Since the lockdown, since March, no. Some of our people have been to on-site bid pitches, which is interesting because those of us who zoomed into them actually had the better audio and visual, because they were sat and they were socially distanced in a meeting room with a spider phone that had really kind of crappy microphones. So actually they really struggled, and actually the people on the Zoom did much better. So it's interesting to see that actually really, in some ways, these meetings kind of go better when they're not in person, although there is something about when you are trying to sell new work is having a bit of a presence. You have to think of alternate ways. Now, one thing I think Lee mentioned just now, talking about collaboration tools. I think one thing that definitely, like other tech, seems to have not really moved on so quickly, but collaboration tech, I mean, Miro and Mural have both suddenly become really popular. Zoom, Hangouts, Teams have all suddenly taken a massive jump in features and quality. So yeah, I think that there are some really positive outcomes from this, that we now know how to run things like workshops, design workshops remotely. We can run, we can code remotely, we can pair remotely through things like VS Code Live. There's a load of stuff we can do now that we kind of struggled before. So we've got this tool belt. So if we do need to, in the future, if you've got somebody in Glasgow and somebody in Bristol, then it might just be a bit more efficient and kind on the environment to do something remotely rather than making a 6-hour train journey.
What about, go on, Lee, what were you going to say, sorry?
I was just going to say, totally agree. And in fact, offices and having lots of physical offices everywhere and hubs. So I know that, some companies maybe have 20 hubs throughout the UK or abroad. they open those hubs to pick, the local talent pool and make sure that they've got, the best local talent. Actually, now it's a very different kind of story because, employees are in the driving seat. They can be anywhere, situated anywhere in the world, pick the company that they want to work for based on nothing to do with location. But actually, those companies have the onus on them to make sure that their package or their, environment is more attractive than all the others. So actually, I kind of think it's a bit of a great thing. And, as engineers, there's a lot of choice that's about to come out of this.
Well, also, we managed to widen our pool. So when we were kind of looking Leeds area only, Manchester area only, well, people from Sheffield, they didn't necessarily want to commute. But actually now, we're going to be remote for some time. So, yes, so for employers, it makes some roles way easier to fill as well.
Have you all found that that's benefited you, having access to talent pools across the world? Because we've got an ex-tutor who came back to us. They live in Berlin at the moment. They're working with us. One of our devs is in Ireland. I think that's awesome. Have you been able to access different streams of talent as a result of this? Have you taken advantage of that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we've opened our Lisbon office and we're just opening up in Melbourne as well. So we have been able to do that. I think it's somewhat limited in terms of the area that I work in just because of national security stuff. So there's a load of stuff that you're not able to kind of share or not able to do. But I think what we've been able to demonstrate is that those things can be done compliantly and safely, as long as people understand what they're looking at and they understand, what they're working with. It can be done as long as you're kind of straightforward with it. So yeah, absolutely. And I agree with Lee. I think it goes from a kind of employer sitting in the driving seat saying, are you good enough for us, to the other way around to say, well, actually, what's your package and how flexible are you going to be? I think it should be down to employee choice. And I mean, I've had to go down for Department of Health briefings because there was a load of stuff that they just didn't want to do over the phone or over Zoom. So they've been the only ones that kind of mandated an on-site presence partially because of the sensitivity of what we were kind of dealing with. So it's a bit of a weird one when all of your other clients are like, no, don't worry. And the Department of Health is the one just be like, come on, off you pop.
It's not like seeing people in real life, though. Was that not a pleasure? Seeing other human beings?
Yeah, it was. But it was also when the Extinction Rebellion guys were kind of doing loads of protests. It was also a really weird thing because they basically blockaded outside the Department of Health. And I was like, here's not the time, not here, not in front of that in a pandemic. And it is like, you think, well, maybe they didn't know Department of Health and Social Care, like massive letters. So I get it. I fully am kind of on board with the message, but these aren't the people that are going to help with climate change. Please go somewhere else. So it was just a really weird time on lots of different levels. It was very, felt like something that Charlie Brooker had dreamed up, and I wasn't quite sure what was going on, to be honest.
I wonder if employers who actually try and force the workforce back into being 4 days a week in the office are just going to see this massive kind of attrition rate as people go, do you know what, I actually quite like working 3 or 4 days remotely or even full-time remotely.
How do you think it should go? Do you think it should be? So I like working from home because my dog isn't on her own all day and it's cheaper and I can go for a walk at lunchtime around where I live or whatever. I can do chores. But at the same time, I like coming into the office because there is absolutely no denying that speaking to people in person gives you the ability to read them better. And you can it's hard to, like, for example, there's a few of us in this chat right now. It's hard for all of us to talk over each other. Whereas in a room, we could do that naturally and it just happens. I'm losing the point of my question. Do you think that being remote is good, or do you think we should be encouraged to go back into the office? What's your opinions on that?
I don't think that employers can specify. So I was talking before about the rush to the remote. There's the risk to return. And, it should be, especially at this stage, employee choice. I mean, I was reading an article the other day about somebody who saw about the vaccine headlines and 95% of effective, and their knee-jerk reaction was, oh, crap. Obviously it's a great thing, but because their sort of gut reaction was, oh, does that mean things are going to go back to normal? And they didn't want that. Obviously the vaccine is a great thing, but it's that actually we've kind of got used to some of these ways of working. There will be some hybrid models, and every organisation will be different. Every employee's circumstances are different. Some people don't have home working environments. Some people want to be in the office. What does need to happen is that if you have that hybrid model, you're not penalised for being in the office or at home. I actually worked on a project about 12-ish months ago where we had a team in London and a team in Nottingham, and we put big TV at the end of the desk, and we had an always-on camera with always-on sound. So it was almost like an extension of the office from one to the other. I'm not saying that, we do that in everybody's homes and that's the right way forward, but there will be ways to be able to collaborate and make sure that people aren't missing out on conversations, rather than just saying, don't talk to anyone in person, go on Slack and type everything on Slack. That's also not the answer. But there will be answers, and there will be good ways of working that come out of there.
They're starting to look into collaboration tools for VR now as well. They're actually virtual desktops with virtual meetings. That I think, with things like the Oculus Rift 2 being super popular, that might be a future way of working. But I think one of the key things for me is once we go back is having the optionality, because right now we don't have the option really. We're kind of stuck. If you're in London, you had some option, but then that's going to be taken away from you quite soon. We don't have much option to go out and do things. Being able to work from home as we please, but then also being able to actually go out and interact with people. When we were asked, do you want to open the offices back up in the kind of bit between lockdown? People said, yeah, and we asked why. And Oaks just wanted to kind of catch up with people. It wasn't because they wanted to do the work there. It's because they wanted to catch up. And having the optionality to actually socially interact, in my opinion, is like way more valuable than the kind of nuts and bolts of putting your flippers to the keyboard, because that can be done anywhere.
It's the point of life, though. I feel like I know that business is about making money, but in actuality, it, and I know this sounds absolutely ludicrous, it's about bringing people together so they've got something to do with their lives, and then putting them in a situation where the return value of that time they spent together benefits their lives outside of the work environment. I feel surely that's the whole point of life. Otherwise, we're missing the point. Rose, you have been a junior developer at Apadmi, which means that surely you've come up to problems where you've just been absolutely blocked and you're going, oh shit, I have no idea what to do next.
Oh God, yeah.
When you're, you can't. I know when I was in the office, I'd just be like, Paul, can you help me? And he'd begrudgingly come and help. How have you gone about that?
I message Paul and ask him to help. No, I don't. So the team that I'm on, the project team that I'm on, are all massively, massively helpful. There's quite a good proportion of seniors on there, and people are always, super happy to give you advice. However, they, as seniors, have more responsibilities than I do. So they're not always necessarily free to talk me through something that isn't necessarily a bit of the project. Similarly, though, we have teams that are more like, it's kind of hard to describe. They're not project specific. They're sort of, I guess, department specific. And you're in a team with like 10 or 15 other people. We have a check-in call every day. It's not necessarily about work. It's just to make sure everyone's okay. We have a bit of a chat. There's people like that you can reach out to and say like, oh mate, I know you're really good on iOS. Can you do this? Not can you do this? Can you help me with this? We have an iOS and an Android channel on Slack. And then it's just an entirely flat structure as well. So if there's anyone in the business that you want to reach out to, obviously it helps the whole business if you know more. So that's useful. And then another really nice level to it is I started Apadmi at the same time as something like 8 other North Coders. They hired us all in one fell swoop. And we all have a WhatsApp channel, and we all have a pretty similar, obviously, level of experience. But what they're really good for is the imposter syndrome issues. You just message them and go, feeling a bit insecure today. And they all go, hell no, here's why. No. It's all in your head. You're fine. And then equally, if any of them came on, I'd say the same thing back to them. So really, I'm covered from all bases. Like, I defy myself to have a problem that someone can't help with, which is so nice. Which is so nice because we're so isolated at the moment. You wouldn't think that would be the case, but it's just, there's people all over that can help you out. I feel very loved.
Good.
That's the thing about the engineering community. It seems intimidating to kind of enter into it, but actually every engineer that I know has a can-do, can-help attitude, and everything is very positive, and everyone is, the first to kind of help someone else with their work, potentially before even doing theirs and creating themselves a problem down the line. So yeah, I think that's a great thing. The fact that that's not been lost over remote is brilliant, and that I think that would have been a shame, and that would have been a bit of a spanner in the works had that been lost. But hearing your story is great.
Yeah, because obviously tech's such a fast-moving, sort of constantly evolving industry. You'd think it would be, and it is competitive, but in a very nurturing, nice way. It's like, well, what can we do to better what we've done before? Not like, I'm going to tear you down so I can do better than you. It's I'll give you a leg up so we as a whole can do better. It's lovely.
Well, what about from the other side? So for you three, how have you been able to find blockers in your company or your progression in the projects that you're working on being so distant from everyone? How have you been able to keep your fingers on the pulse? Because you've all been busy as well. You have adjusting and everything's harder. So how do you still keep your fingers on the pulse and spot problems as they're arising, or do you just find them last minute and then just shit your pants and then try and solve it? How have you been coping with that?
I would say it's a mixed model, a bit of column A, a bit of column B. So I think that it's from a delivery perspective, then I always kind of worry when people go quiet. That for me is a kind of like an amber bell of either somebody's really struggling and they've kind of got their head down and are sort of cracking on, or somebody is kind of grappling with something. So, and actually that is something that is easier to do in lockdown. You can't necessarily see, as you were talking earlier about the visual cues around sort of conversational stuff, you can't see when someone's, maybe got their head in their hands and is thinking, oh God, or has had a family incident or whatever, that something might have happened in their personal life that you're just not kind of aware of. So we've just put extra kind of checks and balances in place around all the sort of projects, in particular some of those kind of critical projects, to make sure that people are feeling okay, that those kind of regular checkpoints are in, and also that people feel it's okay to say, I'm finding this really tough, the pressure on this is really high, I've got X going on and I really need a hand. And I think it's then about working at not penalising people for saying that, because I think that's super important around the tone, that's a good thing for people to feel that they can and should be saying. And the sooner we know about stuff, the sooner stuff can kind of change. And also I think it's about being realistic. Like if you've got no bench and you can't promise somebody there the next day to try and help and scoop something up, it's about saying to somebody when they can expect some help and how that will come and what form it will be, because it doesn't help anybody to say, don't worry, we've got it, we'll sort everything out for you, and that then they're kind of waiting for something to happen that won't be on the timescales they're expecting. I think those things for me are just about honesty and just basically being a good egg around it with people, and that everybody will have their moments where they found this difficult, because we all have, and that people don't feel like that will penalise them in terms of future projects or opportunities or anything like that is super important.
I think one of the other things is kind of the complete kind of opposite to that visit. There's two sides of the same coin on that visibility of work thing. It's also people often aren't aware, and I've found this myself. People aren't aware of how much work other people are taking on as well, because there's quite often multiple streams. So you go, I wonder why this isn't happening. And when you speak to the person virtually in person, they go, well, I was doing this, and they say, oh, right, okay, you're really busy then. Maybe we need to actually get you some help, or we need to push this back a week. But people also then found, I'm just unafraid to say, do you know what, because people aren't traveling to an office for a meeting, people just go, I don't think I can do this meeting right now. I'm knee deep in it, or actually I'm just really tired because I've just been on 6 hours of Zooms. Can we push this back a day? It's like, yeah, that's cool. Because if I travelled to Sheffield to see somebody that went, I don't feel like it now, I'd probably be slightly aggrieved because, travel for an hour, but on a Zoom, it's kind of, okay, I've got an hour of my own time back. So yeah, there's both sides to that coin. It's the visibility of work being done, but also like how much work is just coming in from various angles, especially as we work across offices and across locations. It comes in thick and fast, especially with all of us getting a lot of extra work in through sales effectively. And that's a huge time sink in itself, just dealing with the number of different bids are coming in. I know the NHS public sector bid boards are like absolutely on fire with bids, and that alone can soak up a serious amount of your week.
What do you think about pair programming? So I know that some of my best periods of work remotely have been during pair programming, and there's been times where I think, so in this job that I'm in at the moment, I've not really been doing much software development, and then for a week just before we did the launch of the website, I got to work with some of our devs on the new website, and I was so happy after a day of doing that work in comparison to what I'm doing now, because I was solving problems with mates and we were having a laugh but doing work at the same time, and it's what for me being in the office was like. Do you think that this is for all of you, you intentionally try to encourage pair programming within your dev teams? Because I really do think that not only does that help keep us all on top of potential problems, but it also helps our mental health, undoubtedly for me anyway. Have you all tried to intentionally keep on top of pair programming to make sure that still happens? Because some companies don't see the need in it.
We've been pair everything really. Whenever we're writing decks, whenever we're writing documents, whenever we're doing programming for teaching, everything, we've been doing almost everything in pairs, because just doing it on your own is a lot of kind of unfulfilling activity sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that transparency as well, Jeff, that you're talking about there, helps other people realize that you might be swamped and doing 5 or 6 other things all at the same time. So it's that, you know, problem shared is a problem halved, and also everyone can see the problems you're working on.
For me, I feel like it's just a level of reassurance that you're not entirely barking up the wrong tree. This has been my fear since day one of starting coding, that I'd type something, work at it for hours, and then someone would look at it and be like, what have you done? Like, what are you even getting at? I just need somebody else to go, yeah, no, that's a logical decision. Carry on down that path. You can go a little bit crazy in isolation, I think.
We've got some questions in the chat that I'm going to offer. The first one, Amelia Caffrey's asked, do you think that your imposter syndrome would be better or worse in the office?
Hi, Amelia. Amelia's a very good friend of mine. I've not been in the office very much, so I couldn't tell you. But I'd imagine probably, based on my answer to the previous question, it'd probably be a bit better. Sometimes you feel like something's a really big problem. Like on our project, sometimes I'll run the tests, and today, like 130 of the tests were failing. I just had to update the test file. But like the first couple of weeks of working on the project, I'd have just thought that I'd broken the whole thing. Yeah, so I think always being around people, a network is always much better.
Yeah, if something's broken, you find out about it sooner. Yeah, if everybody suddenly puts their heads in their hands, like, okay, something's up. One thing I found that imposter syndrome, in my opinion, from my experience, like never really truly goes away. You just start to listen to it less, or just pay attention to it if you think, has it got a point this time? You know, am I going outside of my manner, outside of where I should be? Am I speaking to a subject or trying to deliver something I shouldn't be doing? So it's kind of healthy in a way, but learning to ignore it when if you say you're useless, that you have no value to the, like, just no, that's not that. Not identifying with it.
I've got another question here from Joa Jesus, or Jesus, sorry. This one is, something that happened at our office is that meetings lately seem overwhelming. I've had days where I've got no work done and it was just all meetings. Have you had this experience? I definitely have had lots of days just burned. Yeah. And then I get really bad imposter syndrome because I feel like I've done nothing. How about you lot?
Yeah, I don't know if it necessarily gives me imposter syndrome, but I'm definitely an early morning person. So I kind of run out of steam later on in the day. So if I'm leaving my difficult tasks to be done later in the day, I kind of think more the quality of that, and it takes longer. So I sort of, the hangover of it is that I probably work until quite late that night and end up not as fresh the next day, just because I'll be kind of running at stuff on an empty tank. But I think what I've ended up doing is kind of just blocking out time and just making it non-negotiable, because I was doing things where I was like, like going, right, well, here's my 6 litres of water, here's like my 2,000 calories of stuff, and I'm here, and I'm just going to be sitting here for the next 12 to 14 hours and just hope I don't get DVT, fingers crossed, guys. And then having to then think a little bit more about, you actually need vitamin D, because I am in a basement, so I will get some sort of Victorian disease like rickets if I don't get like actively that kind of sunlight. So it's also about making sure that all of those things are in place, and that's not a selfish thing to do, and that people are generally quite accommodating because they'll have their own things that they need to do. So I spent probably about the first maybe 3 months not doing that and thinking everything's urgent and my boundaries are flexible and I'll accommodate to everybody else's kind of timelines and stuff. And that isn't sustainable. So I think about sticking an hour in a day that's for you to go for a walk or have a drink or, you know, do whatever it is, make yourself a nice lunch, whatever. Then I think those things shouldn't feel like a treat in the way that they kind of do. I'm like, oh, it's beans on toast, gourmet treat. That I think it's definitely made me more productive because it's allowed me to step away from problems, like I was saying earlier, and come back with a kind of refreshed and renewed focus. And I've stopped feeling guilty about doing that now. And I think once you can do that, then I think it just kind of makes things a lot better and a lot easier.
Absolutely.
Funny, Lauren, that you said during the first 3 months you did that, because we were working together those 3 months and I was doing that as well. So, you know, if we'd have had that chat a little bit earlier and said, maybe we shouldn't have this sort of Zoom fatigue and, you know, have meetings all day and do our work at night. And because, you know, our work at the time was unbounded. We could find as much work as we could possibly fit in. So that's exactly what we were doing. But yeah, I think our prioritization got a little bit better further down the line.
I think that's the thing with, I think in almost any walk of life, there's always more work. There'll never just be this one day on the news, the work has been done, we can all stand down now. That will never happen. And I agree, because in the first 3 months, because I think we all thought, because that initial lockdown, we might start to ease off, and actually if we just get through this bit, we can just stop doing that. But I think that was just as, failing to adapt to it at the time. But I think I went through a very similar journey. It's got to the point where I realised I did actually start needed to booking some. I mean, we used to have this. I used to do this years ago when we had very, very noisy clients and we sat with them, and we used to have golden time where basically they weren't even allowed near our desks. We had our phones switched off, we had our emails switched off. There was no Slack then. This is a number of years ago, and it was just get some of the tickets done. You know, get some of the work done. And talk to people if you're pairing with them or need to solve a problem. And it was funny, we got as much done in an entire working day in 2 hours like that. Without those distractions, we got an entire day's work done, plus whatever else we managed to do during the day when we're outside of golden time, which I found fascinating.
Laura Lightfoot from Apadmi, I'm assuming, has asked a couple of questions as well. The first one is, what does 2021 hold for each of you? It's been a year of change in new behaviours. So what key learning are you going to take away from 2020 to inspire or motivate you for 2021?
I think I've been surprised by how much we've been able to do. So I'm really positive around taking it as a positive. If you'd have said this would be lasting for this amount of time, do you think it's going to work? I probably would have said no, sort of in February, March. Mm-hmm. So I'm stoked at the impact we've been able to have and the change we've been able to have. And I'm just super proud of everybody that's been working on it, just not just from us, but from everybody else. Like, it just kind of shows, everyone goes on about how inefficient the NHS is, but actually it is, you know, if it's got a common goal and everybody's working to something, it is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm super proud to be part of that. And I'm also proud to be working in an organisation and an industry where it doesn't matter if you've got any money to pay for a vaccine, it will be there for you. Like, it's sort of for everybody. And I sort of truly believe that if we can take some of those things into 2021 and make sure that people treat each other with a bit more kindness and are able to make sure that they are looking in on the neighbours in the way that they have been doing and take some of those new things that they've learned into that, then I think we'll probably just hopefully be a better society as a result of it. And I think it's come from an unexpected corner that we weren't expected to learn these lessons in this way. And also it's reaffirmed how much I just absolutely love science. I'm fascinated by it, and I can't get enough of the fact, you know, all of the vaccine stuff coming through and the fact that Dolly Parton funded one of the vaccines is definitely my favourite fact of 2020.
Jesus. How about yourself, Rose?
I'm looking forward to meeting some more of my colleagues. That's exciting. But Lauren, I think you're right. We've proven that we're as a society, we're way more resilient. I think before this, there was a bit of a perception of people from this sort of day and time that we'd never really been through anything hard. We don't know how good we've got it, etc. But now everyone's proven that they're really resilient, really adaptable, that society doesn't have to be exactly how we were running it, and that things can be done another way. And I think in the future, when we all have bad days, we can still think, well, at least it's not COVID and it'll be loads better. But yeah, 2021 for me, I just want to get a bit more ingrained in sort of probably the social side of the business. The work side, I think I've gotten my head quite into now. I'd like to meet some people, and I'd quite like to go away somewhere hot with sun and alcohol and naps.
Yeah.
So I talked about rushing to remote and things earlier, and Lauren saying, that you, when you went to the Department of Health, you had to do it because they didn't want to do it over Zoom or Teams or, the technology. I think that some things like security maybe went on the back burner and data privacy, and there were a few other concerns. So for me, 2021 is less about touching people, a little bit more about inclusion. So I guess that kind of includes it. But really trust and safety. So it's, do you trust whatever system you're using with your data, with your identity, whatever it might be. And as an organization as well, is there that trust there to adopt this tool, whether it's Mirror or Myra or one of the other things? Like, what happens to that data? Who has access to it? Which country is it stored in? And I think there's a lot around data provenance, data lineage that we probably need to start looking at as we move into the future. Now that we accelerated into digital so fast, we do need to kind of look back and say, right, okay, what did we maybe rush a little bit too much? So I think there'll be a lot of that next year.
Yeah, I think so. In addition to that, is it a lot more? It has really made a lot of companies rethink their digital offerings. And I think there's this big kind of land grab for bricks and mortar to actually have an online presence. I think the IT industry has bounced back. It's bounced back quicker than anybody else. A recruiter told me the other day that it's bounced back to within 1% of where it was last year, and in a month's time it'll be above where it was the year before. So IT as an industry, in my opinion, has bounced back stronger than ever before. We've got better tools. We've got people who are okay to say they're not okay now. We seem to have built something that is a bit better, and actually we now have more work than ever before. And we've got people in the industry who started their careers this year, despite all of the weirdness. I've seen so many people on LinkedIn who've approached me for sort of chats around career advice, and I think all of them now have got jobs in the industry. They're all kind of North Coders or equivalent alumni. So it's great to see the industry is expanding, the work's increasing, thinking about responsible use of our online presence and how we work and how we make this a sustainable and healthy place. So I think 2021, as long as we do actually get to lift some of those restrictions somehow, so we can actually do a little bit of socializing, could be a great year. I think it's full of promise.
Cool. To finish off, how would you sum up 2020 in words?
Exhausting. I am so ready for a break. I finish on Friday, and I'm looking forward to a couple of weeks off. And that's it for me. I think it's been worthwhile. I've learned a lot. I'm hopeful that 2021 will be less eventful, despite Brexit. But yeah, I'm ready for a nap, I think.
Same. Lee, do you want to go next?
I think the word for me is opportunity. So yeah, it's been a terrible year in some respects, but there is so much opportunity that's born out of it, and whether that's for businesses, whether that's for individuals. And then when we get some of the luxuries that we're used to sort of this year and touching people and all of that in, and we couple that with the opportunity that we have now, I think we'll be in a much better place and we'll get the best of both worlds.
Cool. Rose, what about you?
I don't mean to sound too sort of Madonna at a yoga camp about it, but educational, I feel like I've learned a lot about myself. Just how you deal with things when things go weirder than you thought they ever would, and your own ways of coping, and how your own ways of coping won't always necessarily be what you type into Google, how do I cope? Like, you just figure it out yourself. So I think that's a positive thing, coming out of this with more knowledge than I went into it with.
I think that's so true. I've learned more than anything how important it is for me mentally to, I mean, it's obvious that I need people, but it's more the whole being physically active, eating healthy, solving problems with other people, just all of these things that I really took for granted before, and now my pants are ripping because I've put on so much weight. So there you go.
That wasn't, by the way, Lauren, slander to yoga, but you know how like Madonna gets when she goes all wheatgrass?
It's fine. I was just thinking about sort of technical architecture in a downward dog. It's a different, I think, vibe than what Madonna was potentially doing.
Downward dog is a lifesaver.
Not shots fired. It's fine.
Jeff, how about yourself?
I think it kind of, as to echo all of those, I think transformational, just because we've had to transform almost every aspect of our life this year in ways that we probably wouldn't have imagined it could have transformed. And we won't come out of it. We've been through the eye of the needle, as a society with looming recession, our personal and mental health, our actual individual businesses and industries. They've all had to transform, and we'll come out of it at the end different. And the idea that we could go back to a normal, it doesn't exist anymore. That world doesn't exist anymore. It would be something different anyway. We can't go back to where we were before because it doesn't exist.
Which is so sad, but I do hope it goes back to some sort of...
I think changes to be welcome, man. Got to embrace it.
True. Karen, before you take over, Lee, I understand that you're going to give us a rendition of your number one hit record. Is that true? Or
It's definitely not true. Can I just say, this is like more than 10 years ago. I've not listened to it for a really long time, so I'm definitely not digging that out of the archives. Karen, have I got you to thank for this?
Yeah, and I will.
A Christmas song.
I will find it and I will send it out to everybody that signed up to the event. So do not worry, we will get that record. And I know, Jeff, you desperately wanted to get a number one record, so apologies that Lee.
You can have it, Jeff. You can have it. It's all yours. I'll get the name changed.
So I just want to thank everybody. It was such a fun session and probably one of the funniest panel sessions I've been on this year. Ian, you're a star host as always, but thank you, Lauren, Rose, Jeff and Lee. Really enjoyed it. I hope everyone else that was attending enjoyed it. We will send out the recording afterwards, and I hope you all have a really well-deserved break, and we will see you in 2021.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.